Oh, good morning again. So good to be with you. Couple things. I was really hoping the children would have shown up because part of my story was that I knew I wasn't supposed to sneeze or do a lot of activity because of everything that was up here, because during my hospital stay, I did too much. Whatever I wasn't supposed to do, I did. And I started to get a massive hemorrhage from my nose. And since it was Halloween, I had some really gross photos of me to share. But that's a whole other story, because I was sure I was dying and it wasn't funny at the time. And but what was funny was when I got stabilized, I didn't plan to talk about this, but quickly, I really thought I was dying because the blood would not stop, and my ears were filling up. I couldn't hear, and I couldn't breathe and talk because it was all in my throat. And I said, call my wife. That was what I kept saying. And so when they got me stabilized, I wondered why it was taking her so long. So I called her and I said, where are you? She said, I'm in the office, in the house. And I said, oh, okay, they didn't call you. So I proceeded to tell her what I had been through and that I was going to be okay. And I went to send her these really gory pictures. And I sent them to her, but I also sent them to both of our children. One is 12, the other is 16 and was working at the time. So my wife scrambled the text, Daddy's fine. So that was what I did to my children. So it's so good to see you today. I knew there were going to be hundreds of people here today, and there are. There are hundreds of people here today and online, even though some of them are easier to see than others. Not just our friends who are online. But I knew that everyone was going to enter this place carrying with them and carrying with me those we've lost along the way. The people that we have lost, they are stored up inside of us in the memories we made with them, in the stories that we lived alongside them, in the words they spoke into us, in the lessons that they taught us, in the love that we exchanged with them. Some of the people in our past that we've lost, they come to our minds occasionally. Some we remember only very rarely, people we might have gone to school with, people we once had in our lives but didn't see for a long time. But others are ever present, aren't they? Some of the people that we've lost, they're never far from our minds for very long, if at all. So I'm sitting here today, and I seem to be by myself, but I'm not alone, and that's why I brought this chair. In this chair is my cousin Terry, who died from suicide when he was 21, and who I spent many afternoons with on adventures in the woods and late night sleepovers where we would call up DJs from local radio stations when you could do that, and they would play music and we would wait for them to talk to us on the air. So I'm sitting here with Terry, and I carry him with me. I carry his adventurous spirit. And my uncle Sal and Aunt Glora, they're here too. And I spent every Thanksgiving with them, every Christmas in their home, and so much of my young life there. And I carry with them their kindness and their hospitality, and I've tried to replicate that in my life. Susan May is here. She was the pastor who married my wife and I, and who gave me my first taste of ministry. And she actually trusted me to be a student leader. And so I carry here Susan and her love for all people. And my dad's here. My dad, who died suddenly 8 years ago, and I carry with him, well, I actually carry him in the lines around my face that look just like his, and in my bombastic laugh that echoes his, and my irreverent sense of humor, which does echo his, and my heart for the outcast that he had. Hundreds of people whose lives have intersected with mine. They're part of my grief burden that I carry, that you carry here. We all have a grief burden. We all have this backpack filled with lives who we loved and who we no longer have with us. I am a traveling memorial to them, and you are a traveling memorial to those who you have been close to. That is the gift that I have as a survivor. We've seen some of the pictures and online, but I wonder who you carry with you today. Who's sitting in this room with you? Who is ever present in your memories and your stories and your laughter? You know, when someone dies in their obituary, after talking about the deceased person's life, they tell us who they are survived by. The family members who now remain here in their absence, they are the survivors of that person's departure. And we are all survivors of people we love and who we wish were here, or animals that we love and wish were here. And we use the word loss, but I don't really think that's accurate. Helen Keller says that what we once enjoyed and deeply loved, we can never lose, for all that we love deeply becomes part of us. So in that way, today's message comes from the Gospel of Charlie Brown. When Charlie was frustrated or disappointed or sad, he would say, "Good grief." And I used to hear that all the time as a child, and I never really put that kind of phrase together, but that is what I believe. See, we're taught that grief is bad because it's tied to death and loss and sadness and separation, but I don't see it that way. I see grief as a beautiful and comforting. I see it as very good, because that grief is a measurement of the connection that we had with people. It is the evidence of our meaningful relationships. That grief is confirmation of our intimacy with other human beings. And our grief is proportional to our love for them, right? This sadness, this emptiness, this sense of loss is the tax on loving people and being loved by them. The cost of having someone in our lives worth missing. If you mourn today, rejoice. Have gratitude for your grief. And there is a geographic element to this. There is a proximal correlation to our pain. The more central to our stories people are, the greater the grieving now. But we, friends, we are so lucky. How fortunate we are to be able to grieve, to have known other human beings well enough to feel their absence. When my father died, most of the planet, they weren't even aware. They didn't realize what a beautiful human being the world lost, but I knew. I had a front row seat to his life. Who have you had a front row seat to that you know the world should know about? I always tell people that tears are simply a tribute. They are an offering that we make. And so they're wonderful, they're beautiful, they're medicinal. And that's the beautiful paradox for us. More pain equals more love. And maybe that's why the Bible says that blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are those who mourn because they understand what beauty life is. The writer Tolstoy says that only people who are capable of loving strongly can also suffer great sorrow. But this same necessity of loving serves to counteract their grief and heals them. So love is the cause of our pain, and it is the cure of that pain. One of the realities of grieving is that as we grieve and miss people and remember them, we perpetuate their lives in ours. We resurrect a part of them in the present. sometimes with a story that we retell about them, sometimes in a memory that we suddenly grab hold of, sometimes in ways that we're not aware of or can't quantify. We reflect those we've lost as we live, in our thoughts and in our convictions, in our words, incorporating some bit of them, sometimes without even knowing that we do it. Helen Keller goes on to say that we bereaved, we are not alone. We belong to the largest company in all the world, the company of those who have known suffering. You've known suffering. And that is the greatest affinity we have with everyone on the planet. It transcends politics, it transcends religion, it transcends anything that we would think makes us different. Look around you. Everyone is in the throes of grieving something or someone. And this is all history repeating. Because those we miss here today, those who are in this room with us, 30 or 40 or 50 years ago, they too carried the people that they had lost. Those people that they carried had made them who they were and those that we loved. We carry them with us today, and someday, every one of us will be gone, and there will be people here on this planet who will be our survivors, and they will carry us with them. I don't know what you believe spiritually, and to some it might be heresy, but in this way, we're all a little bit immortal. In this way, grief is the one long, beautiful tether, the thread that binds us all together, all of humanity. It's one of the greatest gifts we receive, one of the most elemental parts of our humanity. There is no greater act than to love enough to hurt. But don't get me wrong, it sucks. I had a 23-year-old cousin who passed away, and his father and I were planning the funeral over text, talking about the details of the service, talking about the speakers. And he texted me back, "This blows." And it was his sense of humor that I knew, and there was no better sermon. Terrible, painful. It's the hardest part about being human, the letting go of people. Author Ryan Holiday says, we don't own the people we love. They are on loan to us. And we don't know how long the terms of that loan are. The Stoic tradition that I talked about a couple weeks ago has this phrase, memento mori, which means always be aware of your mortality. Marcus Aurelius writes, you could leave this place at any time, so let that guide how you think and speak and move. Here's what I know about all of us. We'd rather not be grieving. We would rather not have just photos and memories and stories. We'd all prefer people's actual presence instead. And the sting of separation, it's never pleasant. I've told this story before, but after my father died, just a couple of days after, I was sitting having coffee with a friend named Brenda. And Brenda was trying to tell me about the opportunity of my father's passing. She said, you're in pain, I know, but there's an invitation here. You're going to know something you didn't know before. You're going to be able to understand people differently. I didn't want to hear that, right? Because I didn't want whatever she thought was good because I knew it was terrible, but she was right. Grief changes us. It makes us more compassionate. It makes us wiser. It makes us more aware of the urgency of this day. Grief is not good. It is not easy. It is not painless. It is not ideal. It is not pleasant, but it is good. And one of the strange things that death of someone we love does is it clarifies or at least tests what we actually believe about the move from here to hereafter, right? We talk about our spirituality or our mortality, But when someone we love dies, we are pressed up against the reality of that in ways that we never are otherwise. When I lost my father, I was forced to confront my lazy platitudes about death or those of other people. The default responses to the big questions. I had to wrestle with what I really believed about life and death, because my father died in his sleep. And I thought about him lying there, breathing and not breathing, heart beating, heart not beating, being here and being somewhere else, being alive and being dead. And it was hard to wrap my brain around, and still is, what that very thin, fragile space is. And I rubbed up against all the things that people say, right? He's in a better place. I don't think so. Because I know that this place is not better without him, and I can't imagine he's going to be happier by himself than he would be with his children and his wife. They said, he's watching over you. And I said, I don't know. Maybe. That's comforting when I'm writing a book. It's not comforting when I'm using the bathroom, for example. I just said, how often is he watching over me, and when do I get a break? Or people would say, heaven needed another angel. And then I'd say, I don't know. I don't know if God is in that sort of business, really, of taking people away because God needs them somewhere else. But here's what I found out I did know. My father loved me deeply, and I loved him deeply. He's no longer here physically, but he is still present with me every day. What I know is that I was close enough to him to know how much the world lost. And though he was not a household name, he was in my household. We are all household names to someone. Your loss will be felt deeply by people. Press into those lives. Spend yourself on behalf of those people. I get to carry something of my father's life in mine. I am his legacy. I am a steward of his memory, and that's what we do for people who we miss. Shel Silverstein, in his book, Everything on It, says there are no happy endings. Endings are the saddest part. So just give me a happy middle and a very happy start. Today, we mark the endings and the difficulty of those endings, but we celebrate the start and the middle, because the start and the middle are why we're here. The start and the middle are why we grieve, because that is where we got close enough to other human beings to realize how much they matter to us. If you feel lost today, rejoice. If you have emptiness, celebrate it. If you feel sadness, be thankful. Grief is good indeed.